Good morning. Good morning. We are so glad that everyone is with us here today. We're so happy to see each of you, and especially happy to see Brian back with us this morning. We know that he was so excited to be home and wanted to see each of us, and we're just as excited to see him. And as you can see, he has a mask over his face. He still, needs to be a little bit careful around some people, and so if you're sick, Dave, stay away from Brian. We don't want to get him sick. We don't want him in danger. I appreciate a couple of things that Dave had to say this morning, and I know that may sound funny coming from me, that I appreciate what Dave was doing. But I do appreciate a couple of things that he had to say. And you know what? I agree with him. When we get older, things start to go. Just look at him. His health starts to go, his hair starts to go, and the older we get, things start to go. And that's even true with, me. I find myself forgetting little things. And I forgot a couple little things that I should have put on the announcements this morning. Forgot about the traveling youth group. They'll be away tonight at Little Hocking, and so if you would like to go with them, just talk to Joshua or Clint, and they will make sure that they make arrangements to get you there. The second thing is everybody will look on the front of their bulletin. Look on the front page of the bulletin. On the bottom of that page, you will see the address or the web address for our website here at Lower Paw Paw. We're so excited that this had its beginning. It's been several months in the planning. Sarah Miller is the one who's been working on that, and she has done a tremendous job. We encourage you to go home if you've yet to look at it, to search it out. Bring it up this afternoon and search a little bit. It is ever improving. She was given just this morning 5 new lessons to post on the website for this week, along with the bulletin and a couple of pictures. But also we're going to be adding some links that you can click on. For example, a link to Waverly. Another example would be a link to In Search of the Lord's Way. And as soon as I can gather all those, I'll give them to Sarah, and they will be added to that website. And so go home and check it out today. And we really want to encourage you to share it with others, because there will be gospel sermons on the website, our Bible classes on the website, and a lot of good information. For example, our correspondence courses, our open Bible studies, and who to contact if somebody wants to have a study. Either Dave's number is there, my number is there, and who to contact if they would like to have a study. And so please share that with others. I also agree that Dave said we have a lot of things to rejoice about. And we do. 45 times we're told to rejoice throughout the New Testament. And I think one of those big reasons is because, how many times we got to tell our children before they do something? We got to tell our children a lot of times, go clean your room. No, go clean your room. No, go clean your room. We have to tell them several times to go do something before they actually go do it. And so God is telling us 45 times, hey, get that frown off of your face and rejoice. And rejoice. We need to be reminded of that, don't we? What I want to talk to you about this morning, in fact, we just had some lessons on rejoicing not too long ago. But I want to talk to you about something in which we need to rejoice. And that is, we need to rejoice when it comes to our problems. What'd you say? We need to rejoice when it comes to our problems. We'll explain why. But every day, when we get out of bed, we are hit with our problems. Every day. We're hit with problems, with trials, with temptations. The very minute we get out of bed, we're faced with the problem of making sure that we say the right thing at the right time, or that we do the right thing at the right time. Every day when we get out of bed, we are faced with the problem of, am I going to sin today or am I not going to sin? Every day when we get out of bed, we are faced with the problems of this life. And so that causes us to ask the question, okay, well, what do we do? What do we do with the problems that we have in this life? Now, there's an old American saying, I don't know who originated the saying, but I was reading and researching this particular statement, and it is accredited to the Americans, so it is an American statement. And I'm sure it is one that we've all heard at one time or another. Someone once said, on a day like today, I should have just stayed in bed. We've all heard that. On a day like today, we just should have stayed in bed. Now let's look at that when it comes to our problems. Is that the best way to handle our problems? Just to stay in bed? Well, it's a very intriguing idea and a very inviting idea. To stay in bed and pull the covers over our head and just pretend or ignore the fact that we have problems. But here is the problem with that. Our problems are still there. We can pull the covers over our head, we can stay in bed all day, but our problems are still there. They're never going to go away. They'll just wait us out until we decide to get up and face the day, and then we'll have even more problems. So staying in bed and just covering our heads is not the way to deal with them. So what do we do? What do we do with the problems that we have in our life? Well, somebody might say, well, we go and we get help. And you know what? That's also a very intriguing idea, and it's not really a bad idea. But who are we going to get to help us? Well, we can get our family to help us. We can get our friends to help us. We can get our neighbors to help us. We have elders here. We can get the elders to help us. Tom, there's you. You can help us with the problems that are in our life. And you know what? We're all happy to try to help each other through this life and to deal with the problems that we have. But friends, I'm going to tell you something, and I mean this in all honesty. There will come a time where I will fail you. There will come a time in which I can't help you. There'll come a time in which I say, you know, brother, I got problems of my own. I'm sorry, I can't deal with yours right now. There'll come a time in which, well, our wife will fail us. And there'll come a time in which our husband will fail us. And I don't mean that in a bad way. There'll come a time in which our children will fail us. And children, there'll become a time, Benson, that mom and dad's going to fail you. There's going to come that time in which we're not going to be around to help. And so that's not really the best answer, to turn to somebody else in this life. But here's the thing that we need to rejoice about. Yes, we face problems in this life. And yes, there is someone who can help us. And that person that can help us is the great physician, Jesus Christ. In fact, someone once said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, Jesus will always be there, and Jesus will always help us. Now, we may not always accept his help, but he is always there, and he'll always help us. And here's what to rejoice. Here's why we need to rejoice about that. Because, friends, he will help us because he understands what we are facing. He understands the temptation, the trials, the problems that we are facing every day. He understands them because he faced them himself. Appreciate Bobby reading Hebrews chapter 4. And in Hebrews, the 4th chapter there in verse 15 in particular, is something for you and I to rejoice about. And that's the fact that we have a high priest. Now, if you remember, we had this passage of Scripture a few weeks ago, and we noticed, or we talked about, okay, who's our high priest? Well, the answer to that question is actually in verse 14, where here we read, "Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God." Okay, who's our high priest? Jesus, the Son of God. Notice now what we're told about our high priest in verse 15. "For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we." He was tempted like as we in all points, yet without sin. Every problem, every trial, every temptation that you and I face in this life, Jesus also faced those problems. He faced that trial. He faced that temptation. Turn to 1 John. 1 John, the 2nd chapter. And let's notice what we're told in 15, 16, and 17. 1 John, the 2nd chapter. And it's really important for us to understand that when we face problems in this life, when we have trials or temptations in this life, it's important for us to understand the avenues in which we are tempted. Now somebody might think, well, wait a minute, there's hundreds of those. Well, no, not really. There's only 3. And every temptation we face fits into one of those 3 avenues. One of those 3 categories. Okay, well, what avenues are they? Well, let's begin in verse 15. 1 John chapter 2, beginning verse 15. King James Version of the Bible. "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, then the love of the Father is not in him. For that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever." Notice there in verse 16, the 3 avenues that Satan uses even today to try to tempt you and I, to try to trap you and I. There's only 3, and everything fits into those 3 categories. The lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. Jesus, as we're told back in Hebrews 4:15, was tempted in all points like as we. In other words, Satan tempted him in these very avenues that he tempts us today. And because of that, Jesus understands what we're going through. Now somebody might say, no, wait a minute, I'm tempted every day. Jesus wasn't. He wasn't. He wasn't tempted every day. The gospel teaches something different. Turn to Luke the 4th chapter. Luke the 4th chapter. Yes, in one occasion Jesus was tempted in all 3 of these ways. But it wasn't the only occasion. There was many, many more that would come. Turn to Luke the 4th chapter. We're going to begin reading in verse 1. And we'll read down through, we'll make a couple little comments, and then we'll make the point here in verse 13. But don't read ahead. Let's just read together. So Luke chapter 4. Let's begin in verse 1. King James Version once again. "Jesus, being full of the Holy Ghost, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days," what? "Tempted. Being 40 days tempted of the devil, and in those days he did eat nothing. And when they were ended, he afterward hungered. And the devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread." Now let's stop here for a minute. For 40 days, Jesus had nothing to eat. After 40 days, without a doubt, he was hungry. Well, what is hunger? Well, hunger is a desire of the flesh, isn't it? It's a desire of the flesh. And so what does Satan do here? He tempts him to turn the stones into bread and to eat of that bread and thus fulfill that desire. So what do we have here? We have the lust of the flesh. So there's one. The lust of the flesh. To which Jesus said, "It is written that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God." Continuing on. "And the devil, taking him up into a high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time." What did he do? He showed unto him. In some way, somehow, in a moment's period of time, he showed him all the kingdoms of the world. "And the devil said unto him, All this power I will give thee, and the glory of them, for this is delivered unto me, that whosoever I will, I give it. And if thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine." Now, how did Jesus see all these kingdoms? Satan showed them unto him. In other words, somehow he saw them with his own eyes. Satan said, "If you bow down, I'll give you everything that you see here. You'll be in power over everything that you see here. You'll be the king of over everything that you see here. You won't have to die. You'll be the king." What do we have? Well, we have the lust of the eye. There's number two. To which Jesus said, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." And he brought him, he being Satan and him Jesus, he brought him to Jerusalem and set him on the pinnacle of a temple and said unto him, "If thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down, for it is written, Thou shalt give his angels charge over thee to keep thee. And in their hands shall they bear thee up, lest thou at any time dash thy foot against a stone." And Jesus answering said unto him, "It is said, Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." And so he takes him and he sets him up on a high pinnacle, and basically he's saying, "You prove that you are who you say you are." So what do we have here now? Well, we have the pride of life. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Satan tempted Jesus in all points like as we. But yet every time Jesus did not sin, he did not fall for that temptation. Okay, well, Tom, just one time is pretty easy to overcome it. Well, let's bring in verse 13. In verse 13, we read this. "And when the devil had ended all the temptations, he departed from him for a season." He departed from him for a season. That word season in the language New Testament means for a due time, or for a short time, or for an opportune time. And so he departed from him, but it was only for a short time. Now I'm going to ask you to remember the word opportune. And we're going to talk about that here in just 1 second. And so it just wasn't one day and it was over with and he never faced any more temptation. Satan departed from him for a short time. In other words, he would keep coming back. In fact, Satan would tempt Christ all the way up to the cross. Let me share with you a couple of different translations. First of all, the International Standard. The International Standard said, "After the devil had finished tempting Jesus in every possible way." I like that temptation, in every possible way. Lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, the pride of life. He tempted him in every possible way. He left him for another time. In other words, he's going to come back. Let me share with you the New English translation. "So when the devil had completed every temptation, he departed from him until a more opportune time." Now there's that word I asked you to remember. He departed from him for a more opportune time. Now let's just think for a minute. What does opportune mean? Well, if we was to look it up in the dictionary, we would find a definition, something along the lines Opportune is a time that is more suitable for a specific purpose. A time more suitable for a specific purpose. What purpose did Satan have? Did he have a purpose? He certainly did. When he tempted Christ, his purpose was to get Christ to fail. He hoped that Christ would turn his back on God, that he would turn his back on God's mission. That was his purpose. And so he was looking for a more opportune time, a time that was better suited to meet that purpose. And so what are we being told here? Well, we're being told here that Satan would come back again and again and again and again, all the way up to the cross. Each and every time that Satan thought he had that opportune time to meet the purpose, he would come and he would tempt Christ. But yet Christ was tempted in all points like as we, yet without sin. So you see, friends, we need to rejoice because we have in the wonderful Savior, we have in the great physician, we have someone who understands the very things that we face because he faced them. Not just once, but he faced them every day upon this earth. He understands. But there's even a more important reason. We need to rejoice not only because he understands the problems that we face, but we need to rejoice that because of his being tempted, he can help us with the problems of this life. He can help us. Turn once again to Hebrews. Hebrews, the 2nd chapter. And let's notice what we're told here in this passage. Now remember, we said just a moment ago that because he was tempted, because he faced the problems that he did in his life, he is able to help us. Friends, we're going to see here in a moment that is exactly what the Apostle Paul teaches. Because Jesus faced the problems he did, he is able to help us with the problems that we face every day. Hebrews chapter 2. Beginning in verse 17. Wherefore in all things it behooved him to be made more like unto his brethren, that he might be merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make real reconciliation for the sins of the people. For in that he himself hath suffered, being tempted, because he was tempted. Notice what he can do. For in that he himself has suffered being tempted, he is able to succor them that are tempted. That's the King James Version. You know, that word succor here, that's, however it's spelled here, S-U-C-C-O-U-R. That's not a word that we use every day. But guess what? It's in the dictionary. It's in the dictionary. I know that because I looked. I wanted to see what the dictionary had to say about the word succor. I also wanted to find out how it was pronounced. Because I was afraid I wasn't pronouncing it right, but we are pronouncing it right. If we look up succor in the dictionary, we would find the definition to aid or to help. And that is a great definition. I don't always agree with how the dictionary defines things that we read of in the New Testament. But in this particular case, that's a great definition. Because the word succor in the language New Testament means to aid or to help. Wow. To aid or to help. So notice now what the apostle is telling us. The apostle is telling us that because Jesus was tempted, yet without sin, he not only understands the problems that we face, but because he was tempted, he can help us with the problems that we face. But you know what, friends? The end of the problem that we have, well, we don't turn to the one who can help us. And that's sad. Because we fail to turn to the one who can help us, we continue to struggle with the problems that we have in this life. If we would just turn to Him, if we'll just come unto Him, if we'll just obey Him, then He'll help us with the problems that are in our life. In fact, Janet, He's already helped you with your problem. He's already helped you today with your problem. We can go around here. He's helped Clint. He has helped Harold. He has helped Chuck. He has helped me. He has helped my boys, my girl. He has helped all of us with the problem that we have in our life. He's already done that. And friends, He can help you with your problem in your life. He can help you with your problem with sin. In fact, He's already done what needs to be done. He has already given His life upon the cross to make it possible for each of us to have forgiveness. And many of us here today came to Him, and now we have our sins forgiven because of Him. He is able to help us with whatever problem that is in our life, if we will just come to Him. If we'll just come in obedience to Him. We talked about this a little bit in our Tuesday class. You know, and I spoke up, and I try to let Dave, everybody else do some talking, but every once in a while I speak up. And I asked the question, why do we go to the doctor? We go to the doctor because we're sick. Right? Some of us hang on forever until he's forced to go, but eventually he'll go. We go to the doctor because we're sick. You see, the doctor is the only one that can help us to overcome it. If we don't go to the doctor, we'll just keep on getting sick, won't we? It'll just hang on. And perhaps even get worse. A lot of people say, well, I'll come to Jesus after I take care of my sin problem. You can't. You got to go to the doctor. Because only He can help you with the problem of your sin. Only He knows the prescription. He has already fulfilled His part of it. All we've got to do is come in obedience. And those sins will be washed away. If you're here this morning and you have sin in your life, won't you come to Him? Because He can help you with the problems that are in your life, whatever they may be. And once we come in obedience to Him and we're baptized into Him, He will continue to help us with the problems that are in our life. Trials, temptation, whatever that problem may be. He'll continue to help us. Won't you come? Why together we stand and we sing.